The formation stood at perfect attention in the scorching afternoon sun at Naval Station Norfolk. Commander Sarah Chen's boots were polished to a mirror shine, her uniform crisp despite the Virginia humidity that made everyone else's fatigues cling to their backs. She'd been in the Navy for 12 years, earned her way up from enlisted to officer, and had more combat deployments than most of the men standing around her. But none of that seemed to matter today. Captain Richard Hawthorne stood on the raised platform, his jaw set in that familiar expression of barely contained contempt. Sarah had seen it before, every time she'd outperformed his expectations, every time she'd proven herself in situations where he'd clearly hoped she'd fail. The whole base knew about their history. He'd been her commanding officer during her first deployment to Afghanistan, back when she was still a lieutenant. He'd made it clear then that women didn't belong in combat roles, and apparently, a decade later and 2 ranks higher, his opinion hadn't changed. Lieutenant Commander Chen, front and center, Hawthorne's voice boomed across the parade ground. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained impassive. She executed a perfect about-face and marched forward, her mind racing through every decision she'd made in the past 6 months. The mission in Somalia had been successful, they'd extracted the hostages with 0 casualties. The intelligence operation in the South China Sea had yielded critical information that prevented a potential international incident. Her record was spotless. She stopped 3 paces from the platform and saluted sharply. "Sir." Hawthorne didn't return the salute immediately. Instead, he let his eyes sweep over her with undisguised disdain, making sure every sailor, every officer present understood this wasn't a formality. This was personal. "Lieutenant Commander Chen," he began, finally returning her salute with a lazy gesture, "you stand accused of insubordination, reckless endangerment of your team, and willfully disobeying direct orders during Operation Silent Thunder." Sarah's blood ran cold. Operation Silent Thunder, the Somalia extraction. She'd made a split-second decision to alter the extraction route when their intelligence revealed an ambush at the primary exit point. That decision had saved 8 lives, including 2 CIA operatives who were now safe back in the States, probably sitting in their comfortable offices in Langley. "Sir, with respect," Sarah started. "You will speak when spoken to, Lieutenant Commander," Hawthorne cut her off, his voice like a whip crack across the silent formation. The Master Chief standing to Sarah's left, Rodriguez, a good man she'd served with in Iraq, shifted uncomfortably. She could feel the tension radiating from the assembled personnel. Everyone knew this was wrong. Everyone knew Sarah Chen was one of the best tactical officers in the Pacific Fleet. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Hawthorne pulled out a folder, making a show of reviewing documents that Sarah knew he'd already memorized. "Your orders were explicit. Extract the package via Route Delta 7. Instead, you took it upon yourself to override command and used Route Charlie 3, taking your team through hostile territory without proper authorization." "Sir, the intelligence indicated." "The intelligence indicated what I determined it indicated, Lieutenant Commander. Your job was to follow orders, not to think." Hawthorne's eyes glittered with something that looked almost like satisfaction. "This isn't the first time you've shown a disturbing pattern of believing you know better than your superiors." Sarah's fists clenched at her sides, but she kept her voice level. "Sir, with all due respect, my decision saved lives. The ambush at Delta 7 would have resulted in casualties." "The CIA confirmed." "The CIA confirms what serves their interests," Hawthorne interrupted. "What matters here is the chain of command. What matters is discipline. What matters is that officers follow orders, especially officers who are already under scrutiny for." He paused, letting his gaze rake over her again, questionable judgment. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Sarah had filed a formal complaint 8 months ago about another officer's sexual harassment. That complaint had been resolved with a quiet transfer, but the stigma had stuck to her like tar. In Hawthorne's world, women who spoke up were troublemakers. Women who excelled were threats. Women who did both were intolerable. Therefore, Hawthorne continued, his voice taking on a formal tone that made Sarah's stomach drop, by the authority vested in me as commanding officer of this installation, I hereby strip you of your rank of lieutenant commander, effective immediately." The words hit like physical blows. Around her, Sarah heard sharp intakes of breath, a muttered curse from somewhere in the back ranks. This wasn't just a reprimand. This wasn't a formal counseling or even a letter in her file. This was career annihilation, public humiliation designed to break her. Hawthorne stepped down from the platform, approaching Sarah with deliberate slowness. He reached for the insignia on her collar, the gold oak leaves that represented 12 years of service, sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears. His fingers were rough as he ripped them from her uniform, the fabric tearing slightly with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. "You are reduced to the rank of lieutenant, junior grade," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe this will teach you the importance of humility and obedience." Sarah stood rigid as Hawthorne attached the single silver bar to her collar with almost ritualistic deliberation. Each second felt like an eternity. The rank insignia of a junior lieutenant, the same rank she'd held 9 years ago, now sat where her hard-earned oak leaves had been. 3 ranks down. Years of proven leadership, combat experience, and tactical excellence erased in front of 300 witnesses. "Dismissed, Lieutenant," Hawthorne said, practically spitting the diminished rank. Sarah saluted, her arm moving like it was made of lead. She executed an about-face and marched back to her position in formation, every eye burning into her back. She could feel their pity, their anger, their disbelief. Master Chief Rodriguez's jaw was clenched so tight she thought his teeth might crack. Lieutenant Morrison, one of her former subordinates who'd served with her in 3 deployments, had tears streaming down her face despite standing at attention. But Sarah's own eyes remained dry. She wouldn't give Hawthorne the satisfaction. The formation was dismissed with the standard formalities, but nothing about this day was standard. As the ranks broke apart, Sarah walked with measured steps toward the barracks, ignoring the whispers that followed her like a wake. Several officers started toward her, probably to offer condolences or outrage, but she shook her head minutely. She needed to be alone. Her quarters felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in. Sarah stood in front of the mirror, staring at the single silver bar that had replaced her oak leaves. Her reflection looked like a stranger, still her face, still her uniform, but somehow diminished, reduced, erased. The knock on her door came 20 minutes later. "It's open," Sarah called, her voice hollow. Master Chief Rodriguez entered, closing the door behind him with unusual care. He'd been in the Navy for 28 years, had seen combat in 3 different wars, and Sarah had never seen him look as angry as he did right now. "That was horseshit, ma'am," he said without preamble. "Everyone knows it. Half the command staff knows it. This won't stand." Sarah shook her head, sinking onto her bunk. "It already has stood, Master Chief. Hawthorne's within his rights. Insubordination is insubordination, even if the results were positive. You saved 8 lives. I disobeyed a direct order." Sarah's voice was flat, emotionless. She'd spent the last hour building walls around whatever she was feeling, because if she let even one crack show, she'd shatter completely. Rodriguez paced her small room like a caged tiger. "The CIA operatives you extracted, they're writing letters. The SEAL team that provided backup, their commander is filing a formal commendation. Lieutenant Morrison's already started a petition. Stop." Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "All of you need to stop. This will only make it worse. Hawthorne's looking for excuses, and if people start protesting, he'll use it to prove his point about me being a disruptive influence. So what, you're just going to accept this?" Sarah Chen, the woman who stared down a Taliban warlord when her convoy was ambushed, who talked a suicide bomber out of detonating in a refugee camp, who led the first female combat team through Fallujah, "You're just going to take this lying down?" Sarah looked up at him, and for the first time, Rodriguez saw something in her eyes that made him step back. It wasn't defeat. It wasn't resignation. It was something far more dangerous. It was cold, calculated determination. "No," she said quietly. "I'm not going to fight this through official channels, because the system is rigged. Hawthorne knows that. He's counting on it. She stood, squaring her shoulders. But there's another way. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. What are you thinking? Sarah moved to her desk, pulling out a folder she'd received 3 weeks ago. She'd put it aside then, thinking she was too busy, too established in her current role. Now, looking at the classified briefing on the cover, she saw it for what it was, an opportunity. Special Operations Command has been developing a new joint program, she said, handing the folder to Rodriguez. It's classified above top secret. They're looking for officers with specific skill sets for a pilot program that's never been attempted before. Rodriguez flipped through the pages, his eyes getting wider with each one. Sarah, this is insane. The attrition rate for the training alone is projected at 90%. And that's for people starting at full rank in physical prime, not someone who's just been busted down and publicly humiliated. Exactly, Sarah said. Which is why no one will expect me to try for it. Hawthorne certainly won't. He thinks he's broken me. He thinks I'll slink away, maybe take a desk job, eventually resign in shame. And instead? Sarah took the folder back, holding it against her chest. Instead, I'm going to do something only one other woman in naval history has ever attempted. I'm going to earn a qualification that's been held exclusively by Navy SEALs for 60 years. Rodriguez's face went pale. The Trident. You're talking about earning the SEAL Trident. Not exactly, Sarah corrected, tapping the classified folder. This program is beyond the Trident. It's a new special operations qualification that combines SEAL training with additional classified specializations. The medal that goes with it. Master Chief, it doesn't even have an official name yet because no one's earned it. It's called Project Apex. This is suicide, ma'am. You're talking about the most physically and mentally demanding military training ever designed, and you'd be starting it as a humiliated junior lieutenant. The instructors will eat you alive. Sarah's smile was sharp as a knife. Let them try. I've been underestimated my entire career. I've been told I don't belong, that I'm not strong enough, not tough enough, not man enough for this job. And every single time, I've proven them wrong. She looked Rodriguez dead in the eye. Hawthorne wants to destroy me? Fine. I'll let him think he has. And then I'll come back with something he can't take away, can't diminish, can't deny. I'll come back with proof that not only do I belong, but I'm better than he ever dreamed of being. The application process for Project Apex was unlike anything Sarah had encountered in her 12-year career. She couldn't simply volunteer. Candidates had to be nominated by a flag officer, pass a psychological evaluation that made standard command screenings look like kindergarten assessments, and survive a preliminary physical test that had a 70% failure rate before the actual program even began. The psychological evaluation was conducted in a nondescript office in a building that officially didn't exist on Naval Station San Diego. Dr. Patricia Vance, a civilian contractor with clearance so high her file was redacted even to most admirals, spent 6 hours probing every corner of Sarah's psyche. Tell me about your recent demotion, Dr. Vance said, her pen hovering over her notepad. Sarah had expected this. Captain Hawthorne determined that my tactical decision during Operation Silent Thunder constituted insubordination. While I disagree with his assessment, I accept the consequences of my actions. That's the official answer. Give me the real one. Sarah met the psychologist's eyes. The real answer is that I made the right call, saved 8 lives, and was punished because my commanding officer has a pathological need to prove that women don't belong in combat leadership. The real answer is that the system I've dedicated my life to serving just demonstrated that excellence matters less than politics and personal grudges. Dr. Vance made a note. And yet you're here, applying for the most demanding program in special operations. Why? Because if I walk away now, Hawthorne wins. Every man who ever doubted me wins. Every woman coming up behind me learns that the ceiling is real and unbreakable. Sarah leaned forward. And because I need to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I'm not what he tried to make me into today. What did he try to make you into? Small. Defeated. Irrelevant. Dr. Vance studied her for a long moment. You know that Project Apex has a 90% attrition rate. You know that candidates have suffered permanent injuries, psychological breaks, and career-ending failures. You know that you'd be entering this program with a target on your back, a recently demoted officer trying to prove something. The instructors will push you harder than anyone else. They'll look for any excuse to wring you out. Good, Sarah said. I perform better under pressure. The preliminary physical test was held at 0400 the next morning. Sarah stood with 19 other candidates on a beach in Coronado, the Pacific Ocean churning black and cold behind them. Most of the others were men, all of them ranked lieutenant commander or higher. Several were already SEAL qualified and were attempting to add this new certification. They looked at Sarah's single silver bar with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. The instructor, a Master Chief SEAL with a face like weathered granite and eyes that had seen too much death, walked the line. My name is Master Chief Garrett. For the next 12 hours, I will own you. This preliminary assessment will determine if you're even worthy of starting Project Apex. Most of you will fail. Some of you will quit. A few of you might die, we have medics standing by, but accidents happen. He stopped in front of Sarah. Lieutenant Chen. You're the one who got busted down for insubordination. Captain Hawthorne sent a personal note warning me you'd be trouble. Sarah stared straight ahead. Master Chief. You got something to prove, Lieutenant? No, Master Chief. I have something to earn. Garrett's eyes narrowed, but something flickered there, maybe respect, maybe just curiosity. We'll see. Drop and give me 50. Sarah hit the sand and pumped out 50 perfect push-ups while Garrett addressed the rest of the group. By the time she jumped back to attention, he'd outlined the day's agenda: a 4-mile ocean swim in full gear, a 20-mile beach run with 60-pound packs, an obstacle course designed by sadists, and a combat simulation that would test tactical thinking under extreme physical duress. Begin, Garrett said simply. The ocean was a shock of cold that drove the air from Sarah's lungs. Waves crashed over her head as she pushed forward, her arms and legs pumping despite the weight of her waterlogged gear. 2 candidates turned back before they'd gone a quarter mile. Sarah kept swimming. Beside her, a SEAL-qualified lieutenant commander named Davidson kept pace. You're pretty good for someone who just got demoted, he said during a brief lull in the waves. I'm good regardless of my rank, Sarah shot back, then dove under an incoming breaker. By mile 3, 4 more candidates had dropped out, pulled from the water by safety boats. Sarah's shoulders screamed, her lungs burned, but she focused on her technique, on the rhythm of her strokes, on anything but the pain. When her hand finally touched the beach at the 4-mile marker, 6 candidates were already out. The beach run was worse. The sand sucked at her boots with every step, the 60-pound pack grinding her shoulders raw despite the padding. The sun rose, turning the beach into a furnace. Sarah's vision started to narrow, tunnel-like, but she pushed through. She'd learned years ago that the body could go much further than the mind thought possible. The trick was to stop listening to the mind. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At mile 15, Davidson collapsed. Sarah slowed, torn between self-preservation and the code that said you never leave a teammate behind. Master Chief Garrett appeared on an ATV beside her. Keep moving, Lieutenant. He's got medics coming. Sarah hesitated for only a second before pushing forward. Davidson would understand. This was the test, not just of physical capability, but of the ability to make hard choices, to prioritize the mission even when every instinct screamed to help a fallen comrade. By mile 20, only 7 candidates remained. Sarah crossed the finish line 4th, her legs nearly buckling. She had 30 seconds to catch her breath before Garrett pointed at the obstacle course. 5 minutes, Lieutenant. That's how long until the next phase starts. I suggest you hydrate. The obstacle course looked like it had been designed by someone who hated the human body and wanted to punish it for existing. 30-foot rope climbs, walls slick with seawater, a traverse across monkey bars over a pit of mud that smelled like it contained things that would give you infections, and a final gauntlet that required candidates to low-crawl under barbed wire while instructors fired live rounds 3 feet overhead. Sarah's hands were already raw from the ocean swim, her shoulders throbbing from the beach run. She looked at the course and felt something inside her go cold and hard, the same feeling she'd had in Fallujah when her convoy was ambushed, the same clarity that had descended during the hostage extraction in Somalia. Begin. Garrett's voice cracked like thunder. Sarah hit the course at a full sprint. The first rope climb was brutal, her grip kept slipping on the wet fibers, her arms shaking with exhaustion. Below her, one of the remaining candidates lost his grip and fell 15 feet into the safety net, eliminated immediately. Sarah gritted her teeth and hauled herself upward, inch by agonizing inch, until she slapped the top platform. The descent was almost worse than the climb. Her legs were jelly, barely holding her weight as she rappelled down the opposite side. But there was no time to recover, the wall was next, 12 feet of smooth, wet wood that offered almost no purchase. Sarah took 3 running steps and leaped, her fingers catching the top edge. For a moment, she hung there, her body weight threatening to peel her grip away. Then, with a scream that came from somewhere primal and furious, she pulled herself up and over. The monkey bars were a nightmare. Her hands, already shredded from the rope, left bloody prints on each bar. Halfway across, her grip failed. She fell, caught herself with her legs hooked over the bar, and hung upside down for a precious few seconds, blood rushing to her head. The world swam. She could hear Garrett's voice from somewhere far away, "That's it, Chen. You're done." But Sarah wasn't done. She'd never been done, not when the Taliban fighters had surrounded her position in Afghanistan, not when the suicide bomber had his finger on the trigger, not when Hawthorne had ripped the oak leaves from her collar. She swung herself up, caught the bar with her hands again, and continued across, leaving a trail of blood behind her. The barbed wire crawl was the final test. Live rounds cracked overhead as Sarah dropped to her belly and began to low-crawl through the mud. The wire caught her uniform, scraped her back, tore at her skin. She could taste the mud, feel it in her eyes, her nose, her mouth. Every instinct screamed to stand up, to get out of this hellhole, but standing up meant bullets, meant failure, meant proving Hawthorne right. So Sarah crawled. She crawled until her elbows were hamburger meat, until she couldn't remember a time when she wasn't covered in mud and blood and salt water. She crawled past 2 more candidates who'd given up, who lay in the mud waiting for extraction. And finally, impossibly, she emerged on the other side. 4 candidates remained. "Water break," Garrett announced. 5 minutes. Then we do the combat simulation. Sarah collapsed against a concrete barrier, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the water bottle someone thrust at her. Next to her, a Marine captain named Chen, no relation, but the shared name had created a strange kinship, looked equally destroyed. "How are you still moving?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "No offense, but you're what, 5'6"? Maybe 130 pounds soaking wet? You shouldn't be able to keep up with us." Sarah took a long drink before answering. "Because quitting isn't in my DNA. And because every person who ever told me I couldn't do something is watching, waiting for me to fail. I won't give them the satisfaction." The combat simulation was the final test, and it was diabolical. Each candidate was given a team of 4 recruits, actors, really, played by junior enlisted who'd been briefed on how to make everything as difficult as possible. The scenario: extract a high-value target from a hostile compound with limited intelligence, no backup, and a ticking clock. Sarah's team looked at her single silver bar with undisguised skepticism. One of them, a cocky seaman who couldn't have been more than 20, actually smirked. "You're our team leader? The lieutenant who got busted down?" Sarah's eyes went cold. "I'm the officer who's going to get you through this simulation alive. You got a problem with that, voice it now. Otherwise, shut up and listen." The kid's smirk vanished. Sarah assessed the scenario with the tactical mind that had kept her alive through 4 combat deployments. The compound had 3 entry points, all covered by simulated enemy fire. The high-value target was being held in a second-floor room with 1 window. They had 15 minutes before reinforcements arrived and the mission became impossible. "We're not going through the doors," Sarah announced. "We're going through the wall." Her team looked at her like she was insane. "Ma'am, we don't have breaching charges," one of them said. "No, but we have a vehicle, improvised explosives from the supply cache, and a diversion. Here's what we're going to do." Sarah sketched out her plan in the dirt, audacious, unconventional, exactly the kind of thinking that had gotten her demoted in the first place and saved 8 lives in Somalia. The plan worked. While 3 candidates struggled with conventional approaches, Sarah's team breached the weak wall on the compound's blind side, extracted the target, and were clear of the kill zone in 12 minutes. Master Chief Garrett watched the whole thing from the observation tower, his expression unreadable. When the simulation ended, only 3 candidates remained: Sarah, the Marine Captain Chen, and a SEAL lieutenant commander named Briggs who looked like he'd been chiseled from granite. Garrett addressed them as the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and purple. "Congratulations. You've passed the preliminary assessment. You are now authorized to begin Project Apex training, which starts in 72 hours. I suggest you use that time to get your affairs in order, say goodbye to your loved ones, and make peace with whatever God you believe in. Because the next 6 months are going to break you in ways you can't imagine." He paused, his eyes settling on Sarah. "Lieutenant Chen. A word." Sarah followed Master Chief Garrett to a small office overlooking the beach where they'd started the assessment 12 hours ago. Her entire body was a symphony of pain, muscles she didn't know she had were screaming in protest, her hands were wrapped in temporary bandages that were already seeping blood, and she was pretty sure she had at least 1 cracked rib from the obstacle course. Garrett closed the door and gestured to a chair. Sarah remained standing. "Sit down, Lieutenant. That's not a suggestion." Sarah sat, barely suppressing a wince as her battered body protested the movement. Garrett settled behind his desk, studying her with those dark eyes that seemed to see through armor, through skin, right down to bone and soul. "You know why I asked to speak with you? Because you're going to tell me that despite passing the assessment, I'm not suitable for Project Apex due to my recent disciplinary action," Sarah said flatly. "Or because Captain Hawthorne has been making calls, pulling strings, trying to ensure I don't get this opportunity." A ghost of a smile crossed Garrett's weathered face. "Hawthorne has indeed been making calls. 3 in the last week alone. He's convinced you're a liability, that your presence in Project Apex would compromise the integrity of the program." Sarah's jaw tightened. "And you believe him?" "I believe that Richard Hawthorne is a small man with a big ego who can't stand the fact that you're twice the officer he'll ever be," Garrett said bluntly. "I served with him in Iraq. I know exactly what kind of commander he is, the kind who takes credit for subordinate successes and assigns blame for his own failures. The kind who sees competent women as threats instead of assets." Sarah blinked, not sure she'd heard correctly. "Sir. I also pulled your complete service record, Lieutenant. Not the sanitized version Hawthorne provided, but the real one. For combat deployments. 7 commendations for valor. You successfully led a team through Fallujah during some of the heaviest fighting of the Iraq War. You talked a suicide bomber out of detonating in a refugee camp, saving an estimated 200 civilians. And the Somalia operation, the one Hawthorne used to bust you down, resulted in 8 lives saved, including 2 CIA operatives and 3 SEALs who would have walked into an ambush if you hadn't changed the extraction route." Garrett leaned forward. "You made the right call in Somalia. Every operator I've spoken to who was on that mission agrees. The SEAL team commander submitted a formal commendation for you. The CIA station chief wants to give you a medal. But Hawthorne used his authority to bury all of it because you committed the cardinal sin of being right when he was wrong." Sarah felt something crack in her chest, relief, validation, rage, all mixed together until she couldn't tell them apart. "Then why are we having this conversation, Master Chief?" "Because I need you to understand what you're walking into. Project Apex isn't just the most demanding training program ever designed. It's also the most political. The program exists because Special Operations Command finally acknowledged what should have been obvious decades ago, that the next generation of warfare requires operators who can blend SEAL-level combat skills with intelligence gathering, cultural expertise, and unconventional warfare tactics. The medal that goes with completion, the one that doesn't have an official name yet, represents a new tier of special operations. Garrett pulled out a classified folder. But there are people in the Pentagon, in Congress, in the upper echelons of every service branch, who don't want this program to succeed. They see it as a waste of resources, or worse, as a threat to traditional special operations. And if a recently demoted female officer becomes one of the first to earn this qualification. He trailed off meaningfully. I become a symbol, Sarah finished. A symbol that either proves the program works or proves its critics right. Exactly. If you succeed, you validate everything Project Apex represents. If you fail, especially if you fail publicly, dramatically, you give ammunition to everyone who wants to see the program terminated. And Hawthorne knows this. He's counting on you trying and failing. Hell, I bet he's actively hoping for it. Sarah stood, her legs protesting but holding firm. Master Chief, I appreciate the warning. But I didn't come here to be a symbol. I came here to earn something that can't be taken away by small-minded men with fragile egos. I came here to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I belong at the highest levels of this profession. Garrett stood as well, coming around the desk. For a long moment, he just looked at her, this small, battered woman with bloody hands and fire in her eyes. Then he extended his hand. Then I'll see you in 72 hours, Lieutenant. And for what it's worth, I think you're going to make history. Sarah shook his hand, her grip firm despite the pain. I'm not interested in making history, Master Chief. I'm interested in making it impossible for the next woman to be treated the way I was. The 72 hours before Project Apex began were a blur. Sarah spent the first day in medical, getting her hands properly treated, her ribs wrapped, and a battery of tests to ensure she was physically capable of starting the program. The doctor, a Navy captain with kind eyes, had looked at her injuries and shaken his head. You know you can defer for a few weeks, let these heal properly, he'd said. Can't, sir. If I defer, I give my critics time to work on getting me removed from the program entirely. The second day, Sarah returned to Norfolk to collect her belongings and officially transfer to the training facility. She'd hoped to slip in and out unnoticed, but news of her passing the preliminary assessment had spread through the base like wildfire. Sailors she barely knew stopped her to offer congratulations. Officers who'd watched her demotion looked at her with something like awe. Lieutenant Morrison found her in the barracks, tears streaming down her face. You did it. You actually did it. Sarah, do you know what this means? Do you know how many women are watching you right now? Sarah embraced her friend, feeling the weight of expectation settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. I can't think about that, Amy. If I start thinking about representing anyone other than myself, the pressure will crush me. But you do represent us, Morrison insisted. Whether you want to or not. Every woman who's been passed over, every woman who's been harassed, every woman who's been told she doesn't belong, we're all riding on your shoulders. The third day, Sarah visited her parents in Arlington. Her father, a retired Army colonel, looked at her bandaged hands and wrapped ribs with a mixture of pride and concern. Her mother, who'd been a military wife for 30 years before becoming a widow when Sarah's father retired, just held her daughter close. You don't have to do this, her mother whispered. You've already proven yourself 100 times over. I have to, Mom. Not for Hawthorne, not for the Navy, but for me. I need to know I can do this. Her father gripped her shoulder. Then you go show them what Chen family steel looks like. And remember, it's not about being better than the men. It's about being the best version of yourself. Project Apex training began at 0400 on a Monday morning at a classified facility in the mountains of Colorado. Sarah arrived with her two fellow preliminary assessment survivors, Marine Captain James Chen and SEAL Lieutenant Commander Kyle Briggs, along with 7 other candidates who'd passed assessments at different locations. 10 total candidates. According to the briefing materials, historically, only one would complete the program. The facility itself was like nothing Sarah had ever seen. Built into the side of a mountain, it contained everything from an Olympic-sized pool to a shoot house to what looked like a small city designed specifically for urban warfare training. The altitude alone, over 9,000 feet, would make every physical task exponentially harder. Master Chief Garrett stood in the pre-dawn darkness, flanked by 4 other instructors whose reputation preceded them. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, one of only 3 women to have completed BUD/S and the first to serve in a SEAL team. Sergeant Major David Park, a Delta Force operator with a kill count that was still classified. Chief Warrant Officer Maria Rodriguez, a Night Stalker pilot who'd flown some of the most dangerous missions in Afghanistan. And Captain Thomas Reed, a Green Beret with more combat deployments than the rest of them combined. "Welcome to Project Apex," Garrett began. "For the next 6 months, we will push you beyond anything you've experienced." The preliminary assessment was designed to see if you had the physical capability to be here. This program will determine if you have the mental fortitude, the tactical acumen, and the sheer force of will to become something new, a Tier 1 operator capable of functioning in any environment, against any threat, with any team. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell stepped forward. The training is divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 is advanced combat training. We're going to teach you to kill in ways you've never imagined, with weapons you've never touched, in situations that would make your previous combat experience look like a training exercise. Sergeant Major Park took over. Phase 2 is advanced intelligence and unconventional warfare. You'll learn to blend in anywhere, to extract information from anyone, to turn any situation to your advantage. You'll become fluent in at least 2 additional languages, master cultural norms from 6 different regions, and learn to disappear so completely that your own mother wouldn't recognize you. Chief Rodriguez spoke next. Phase 3 is integration, bringing all your skills together in realistic scenarios that will be indistinguishable from actual combat operations. We'll drop you in simulated hostile territories with real consequences for failure. People have died in Phase 3. Not often, but it happens. Captain Reed delivered the final piece. If you complete all 3 phases, you'll stand before a review board of flag officers and prove you deserve to wear the medal. It's called the Apex Trident, similar to the SEAL Trident you all know, but with a significant difference. It represents not just one specialization, but mastery of all special operations disciplines. Garrett raised his voice, ensuring every candidate heard clearly. Look to your left. Look to your right. Statistically, the people you see right now won't be here in 6 months. Hell, most of you won't be here in 6 weeks. This program has a 90% attrition rate, and we're proud of that number. It means we're maintaining the highest possible standard. His eyes found Sarah. Some of you are here to prove something. Some are here for glory. Some are here because you think you have what it takes to be the best. I don't care about your motivations. I only care about results. If you can't hack it, ring out. There's no shame in recognizing your limitations. But if you stay, if you push through, you'll become part of something that will change the future of special operations. The first week was designed to break them. They started each day with a mountain run at altitude, 6 miles straight up, then 6 miles straight down. Then came the pool, hours of underwater swimming, breath hold training, and surf torture that made BUD/S Hell Week look like a warm-up. Then came combatives, hand-to-hand fighting with instructors who pulled no punches, literally. Sarah discovered muscles she didn't know existed, all because they were screaming in agony. The altitude made everything harder. Her lungs couldn't get enough oxygen, her body couldn't recover fast enough. She watched as the first candidate rang out on day 3, then 2 more on day 5. The breaking point came on day 7. They'd been awake for 40 hours straight, completing a navigation exercise in the mountains with minimal equipment and no food. Sarah's body was running on fumes, her mind starting to play tricks on her. She was hallucinating, seeing her father in the trees, hearing Hawthorne's voice on the wind, watching the oak leaves from her collar drift past on non-existent breezes. She stumbled, nearly fell, caught herself against a tree. Just sit down, a voice in her head whispered. Just rest for a minute. No one would blame you. You've already proven more than anyone expected. But then she saw something else in her delirium, Lieutenant Morrison's face, and behind her, a sea of other faces. Women in uniform, women who'd been told they weren't good enough, weren't strong enough, didn't belong. They were all watching, waiting to see if Sarah Chen would break. Sarah pushed off the tree and kept moving. She reached the checkpoint at hour 43, fourth to arrive. Captain Chen, the Marine, was already there, along with Briggs and an Army Special Forces captain named Williams. They looked at her with a mixture of respect and exhaustion. No words were spoken. None were needed. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell met them at the checkpoint with water and protein bars. You four are the only ones still in the exercise. The others either rang out or missed the time hack. Get some food, get some water. You've got 4 hours of sleep, then we start language immersion. Sarah collapsed next to a tree, forcing herself to eat even though her stomach rebelled. Briggs sat down beside her, his granite face showing rare signs of fatigue. You surprise me, Chen, he said quietly. When I saw your rank, I figured you'd be the first to quit. Thought maybe you were just trying to prove a point, that you'd give up when it got real. Sarah looked at him through eyes red with exhaustion. And now? Now I think you might actually make it. Hell, I think you might beat all of us. He paused. That thing Hawthorne did to you, that public demotion, most people would have crawled into a hole and disappeared. What made you different? Sarah thought about the question, too tired to deflect or give a diplomatic answer. Because if I disappeared, it would confirm everything they already believe about women in combat. It would make it that much harder for the next woman, and the next, and the next. Someone has to break the cycle. Might as well be me. Week 3 brought the weapons phase, and Sarah discovered that everything she thought she knew about combat was merely the foundation. The instructors introduced them to weapons systems from every major military on the planet, American, Russian, Chinese, European, even improvised weapons from insurgent groups. They had to disassemble, reassemble, and fire each one blindfolded, in the dark, underwater, and under simulated combat stress. Sergeant Major Park was a merciless instructor. In the field, you use whatever's available, he barked as Sarah struggled to clear a jam in an AK-47 while hanging upside down from a rope. You think the enemy's going to hand you your preferred weapon? You think they're going to wait while you figure out which way the safety goes? Sarah cleared the jam, fired 3 rounds center mass on the target, and dropped back to the ground. Her head spun from the blood rush, but she'd completed the drill. Again, Park said. This time with the RPK. 30 seconds. By week 4, 2 more candidates had rung out. One simply couldn't handle the psychological pressure of the interrogation resistance training, 12 hours of simulated capture, torture, and psychological manipulation designed to break even the strongest minds. The other suffered a compound fracture during an advanced climbing exercise and was medically eliminated. 6 candidates remained. The language immersion was brutal in its own way. Sarah already spoke Mandarin fluently, a gift from her immigrant grandmother who'd insisted on maintaining their heritage. Now she was learning Arabic and Pashto simultaneously, for hours a day with native speakers who refused to use any English. The instructors would wake them at random hours, bark questions in the target language, and punish any hesitation with additional physical training. Chief Rodriguez pulled Sarah aside after a particularly grueling language session. You're doing well, Lieutenant. Better than well, actually. You're in the top 3 for every category we're tracking. Sarah waited for the other shoe to drop. There was always a but coming. But, Rodriguez continued, proving Sarah right, you're compensating for your size disadvantage by overtraining. I've seen you in the gym at 0200, running extra miles after the required PT. You're not sleeping enough, not recovering enough. At this pace, your body's going to break down. With respect, Chief, I can handle it. Rodriguez's eyes hardened. I'm sure you think you can. But this isn't about toughness or willpower. It's about smart training. The men you're competing against have natural physical advantages: height, weight, muscle mass. You can't outmuscle them, so you're trying to outwork them. I get it. But you're going to injure yourself, and then all this effort will be for nothing. Sarah knew Rodriguez was right, but admitting it felt like weakness. What do you suggest, Chief? I suggest you start training smarter, not harder. Use your advantages. You're faster, more flexible, better at problem solving under pressure. Stop trying to beat the men at their own game and start playing yours. Rodriguez softened slightly. Look, I was the first woman to fly combat missions with the 160th SOAR. I know what it's like to feel like you have to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. But you're already proving yourself. You don't have to destroy your body to do it. That night, Sarah actually slept the full 4 hours allotted. When she woke, she felt almost human for the first time in weeks. Week 6 brought urban warfare training, and Sarah found her element. The shoot house was a constantly reconfiguring maze of rooms, hallways, and obstacles populated by role players who could be hostages, civilians, or enemies. The candidates had to clear it in teams, making split-second decisions about who to shoot and who to save. Sarah's team consisted of herself, Captain Chen, and a Navy EOD officer named Lieutenant Davis. They moved through the shoot house like a well-oiled machine, communicating with hand signals and the kind of intuitive understanding that came from shared suffering. Sarah took point, her smaller stature allowing her to move through tight spaces faster than the men. Contact front. She dropped a role player wearing an enemy uniform, then immediately shifted her aim as a civilian ran into her line of fire. She held her shot, grabbed the civilian, and pushed them behind her towards safety. The scenario escalated: multiple hostiles, booby traps, a ticking clock. Sarah's mind went into that cold, clear space where everything slowed down and every decision was obvious. She led her team through the chaos, neutralizing threats, protecting civilians, and securing the objective with 30 seconds to spare. When they emerged from the shoot house, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell was waiting with a rare smile. That was textbook, Chen. Actually, it was better than textbook, it was instinctive. You see patterns other people miss. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow we're doing it again, but this time you'll be the hostage, and you'll have to escape and evade on your own while your teammates hunt you. Consider it payback for making them look bad today. The escape and evasion exercise was designed to be impossible. Sarah was given a 30-minute head start, then the other 5 candidates were released to hunt her. She had no weapons, no equipment, just the clothes on her back and the knowledge that if she was caught, she'd spend the next 12 hours in interrogation simulation. Sarah used every trick she'd learned. She backtracked through a stream to hide her trail, climbed a tree and moved through the canopy to avoid ground pursuit, used mud to camouflage herself and mask her thermal signature. She could hear the others searching, hear their frustrated conversations as they lost her trail again and again. But Briggs was good, better than good. He'd been doing this for years with the SEALs, and he knew every trick Sarah was using because he'd invented half of them. On hour 6, Sarah heard him getting close. She was hidden in a drainage culvert, barely breathing, covered in mud and leaves. Briggs walked past her hiding spot once, twice. On the 3rd pass, he stopped. Sarah could see his boots through the grate, just inches from her face. I know you're here, Chen, Briggs said quietly. Your discipline is impressive. Most people would have broken by now, made some sound, given themselves away. But you've got patience. Sarah remained absolutely still. If she could hold out for another hour, she'd win the exercise. But here's the thing, Briggs continued. I found your trail 2 hours ago. I've been following you since the stream. I know every move you've made, every hiding spot you've used. I'm not trying to catch you. I'm trying to teach you something. Despite her best judgment, Sarah spoke. What's that? Briggs crouched down, peering through the grate at her mud-covered face. That even the best of us get caught eventually. The question isn't whether you can avoid capture forever. It's whether you can survive it when it happens. Come on out, Chen. Let's see if you're as good at resisting interrogation as you are at evading it. The interrogation room was deliberately generic: concrete walls, a metal table, 2 chairs, and lighting that was bright enough to be uncomfortable but not quite torture. Sarah sat in one chair, hands zip-tied behind her back, while Master Chief Garrett sat across from her. He'd been at it for 4 hours now, alternating between good cop and bad cop so seamlessly it would have been impressive if Sarah wasn't the target. "Let's go over this again, Lieutenant," Garrett said, his voice deceptively friendly. "You were captured during a classified operation in a hostile nation. Your team is dead. You're the only survivor. Now, I need you to tell me about your mission parameters." Sarah gave the same answer she'd given for 4 hours straight: Chen, Sarah. Lieutenant, United States Navy. Service number 5572398. Garrett's hands slammed on the table, making Sarah flinch despite her determination not to react. "Your team is dead. You understand that? Dead because of bad intelligence, because someone leaked your operation. If you don't tell me what I need to know, their deaths mean nothing." It wasn't real. Sarah knew it wasn't real. But the sleep deprivation, the stress position they'd kept her in for the first hour, the isolation, the constant psychological pressure, it all combined to make her doubt, to make her want to just give them something, anything, to make it stop. "Chen, Sarah. Lieutenant, United States Navy. Service number 5572398. Garrett stood, paced behind her. Sarah couldn't see him, which made it worse. Every sound was amplified: the scrape of his boots, the rustle of papers, the crack of his knuckles. "You think you're being brave? You think you're protecting something? Let me tell you what's really happening. While you sit here playing hero, your superiors are already writing you off. Captain Hawthorne sent a message 3 hours ago. You want to know what it said?" Sarah's jaw clenched. Invoking Hawthorne was a psychological tactic, she knew that, but it still hit like a physical blow. He said, and I quote, "Lieutenant Chen has always been prone to poor judgment and emotional decision-making. Her capture is unfortunate but predictable. Recommend we consider her compromised and proceed accordingly." Garrett came back into view, his face inches from hers. "He's already throwing you away, Chen. The man who destroyed your career is now erasing you entirely. And you're protecting him? Protecting a system that doesn't give a damn about you?" For the first time, Sarah felt her resolve waver. Not because she believed they were really captured, not because she thought Garrett was really her enemy, but because in some terrible way, the words rang true. Hawthorne would throw her away. The system had already proven it didn't value her, no matter how much she sacrificed. "Chen, Sarah. Lieutenant, United States Navy. Service number 5572398. But her voice cracked on the last number. Garrett heard it, pounced on it like a predator scenting blood. "That's it, isn't it? You're starting to realize. You're starting to understand that everything you've believed about honor, about loyalty, about the chain of command, it's all a lie. They'll use you up and throw you away, and for what? For nothing." "Chen, Sarah," she couldn't finish. The words stuck in her throat. "Just give me something, Lieutenant. Anything. Prove to me that you're valuable, that you're worth saving. Because right now, from where I'm sitting, you're just another failed officer clinging to outdated ideals that nobody cares about anymore." Sarah closed her eyes, searching for the center of herself, the core that had gotten her through Fallujah, through the public humiliation, through every moment when someone had told her she didn't belong. She thought about Lieutenant Morrison's face, about the women watching her, about her father's words, "It's about being the best version of yourself." When she opened her eyes, they were clear. "Chen, Sarah. Lieutenant, United States Navy. Service number 5572398. Garrett held her gaze for a long moment, then stepped back. "Okay," he said, and his voice was different now, respectful, almost gentle. "Okay, Lieutenant. You passed. The zip ties were cut. Sarah's hands were numb, her shoulders screaming from being held in position for so long. Garrett handed her a bottle of water, which she drank gratefully. "You lasted longer than anyone expected," he said. Briggs cracked at hour 3. Captain Chen made it to hour 5 but gave up mission details. "You held the line for 8 hours straight, even when we used your worst fears against you." Sarah rubbed her wrists, trying to get feeling back. "The Hawthorne thing, that was particularly cruel. It was necessary. We need to know that you can resist when the enemy uses your own demons against you. Because they will, Chen. They'll dig into your past, find your weak spots, and exploit them mercilessly. If you can't handle us doing it in a controlled environment, you'll never survive the real thing." Lieutenant Commander Mitchell entered with a medical kit. "Let's get you checked out, Lieutenant. You've got stress fractures in your wrists from fighting the restraints, and your shoulders partially dislocated." As Mitchell worked on her injuries, Sarah asked the question that had been bothering her. "How many have made it this far?" "Through Phase 1. Mitchell and Garrett exchanged glances. "You and 3 others," Mitchell said. "You, Briggs, Captain Chen, and Lieutenant Davis." 6 candidates started Phase 1. 2 rang out, 2 were medically eliminated. 4 of you are ready to move to Phase 2. "The intelligence phase," Sarah said. Garrett nodded. "You think Phase 1 was hard? Phase 2 is where we really start separating the operators from the pretenders. You'll learn to think like a spy, to manipulate like a con artist, to disappear like a ghost. And you'll do it all while maintaining the combat capabilities you've built up." Sarah flexed her injured shoulder, testing the range of motion. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow," Mitchell said. "But tonight, you actually get a break. 12 hours of sleep, real food, and time to process everything you've been through. Use it wisely, because starting tomorrow, we're going to tear down everything you think you know about yourself and rebuild you into something new." That night, Sarah lay in her bunk, the first real bed she'd slept in for 6 weeks, and stared at the ceiling. Her body was a disaster zone of injuries, each one a badge of survival. But more than the physical pain, she felt the psychological weight of what she'd endured. The interrogation had stripped away her defenses, forced her to confront the truth. She was fighting not just for herself, but for something larger. Her phone, locked away during training, had been returned with her personal effects. She had one message, sent weeks ago from Lieutenant Morrison: "We're all watching. Don't you dare give up." Sarah closed her eyes and, for the first time in 6 weeks, allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she was attempting. Then she set her alarm for 0400, because 12 hours of rest was all she needed. Tomorrow, Phase 2 began, and Sarah Chen was going to prove that she belonged among the elite. Phase 2 began in a nondescript classroom with Captain Reed standing at the front. The 4 remaining candidates, Sarah, Briggs, Captain Chen, and Lieutenant Davis, sat in chairs that felt impossibly comfortable after weeks of brutal physical training. "Welcome to the intelligence phase," Reed began. "Everything you've done up to this point was about building your body and your tactical skills. Now we're going to build your mind in ways you've never imagined. You're going to learn to lie so convincingly that polygraphs can't catch you. You're going to learn to read people so accurately that you'll know their secrets before they speak. You're going to learn to become anyone, anywhere, anytime." He pulled up a photograph on the screen, a Middle Eastern man in his 40s, wearing traditional dress. "This is Ahmed Khalil. He doesn't exist. We invented him. But by the end of this month, one of you is going to become him. You'll walk into a room full of native Arabic speakers, intelligence analysts, and cultural experts, and you'll convince them that you are Ahmed Khalil. If you fail, if anyone suspects you're not who you claim to be, you fail Phase 2. Sarah's mind raced. She spoke Mandarin fluently, had learned Arabic to a functional level during Phase 1, but becoming someone else entirely? That was a different magnitude of challenge. The next 4 weeks were a masterclass in deception and cultural immersion. They studied not just languages but micro-expressions, body language, cultural norms so specific that Sarah learned there were 17 different ways to greet someone in Pashto depending on their social status, age, and relationship to you. They practiced lying while hooked to polygraphs, learned to control their heart rate and breathing to defeat the machines. Sarah discovered she had a natural talent for reading people. Where Briggs excelled at physical intimidation and Captain Chen at tactical planning, Sarah could walk into a room and within minutes know who held the real power, who was hiding something, who could be manipulated. It was like a sixth sense, developed over years of being underestimated and having to read situations perfectly to survive. The transformation exercises were the strangest part. They spent hours in makeup, learning to alter their appearance. Sarah practiced walking like a man, sitting like an elderly woman, moving with the confidence of a corporate executive or the deference of a servant. She learned to inhabit different personas so completely that she could maintain them for days without breaking character. The key, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell explained during a one-on-one session, is to find the truth in the lie. Don't try to be someone completely foreign to yourself. Find the parts of the character that resonate with who you really are, then build from there. Sarah's assignment was particularly challenging. She had to become Mei Lin, a Chinese-American businesswoman with ties to both the tech industry and certain unsavory elements in Beijing's intelligence community. The persona was close enough to Sarah's own background to be believable but different enough to require constant vigilance. The test came on week 8. Sarah was dropped in San Francisco's Chinatown with nothing but the clothes on her back and her cover identity. Her mission, make contact with a foreign agent, played by a real intelligence operative who didn't know this was a training exercise, extract information about a fictitious weapons sale, and exfiltrate without blowing her cover. Sarah became Mei Lin. She moved through Chinatown with the entitled confidence of someone who belonged, speaking Mandarin with the specific accent of someone raised in Shanghai but educated in America. She found the target in a tea house, a Russian businessman who was actually a CIA operative testing her skills. "Mr. Volkov," she said, sliding into the seat across from him uninvited. "I believe we have mutual interests to discuss." The operative, Volkov, studied her with eyes that missed nothing. "I don't believe we've met." "We haven't. But my associates in Beijing suggested we should remedy that. They tell me you're looking for certain technical specifications. I may be able to help with that." For the next 2 hours, Sarah danced on the knife's edge. One wrong word, one cultural misstep, one crack in her persona, and she'd fail. Volkov probed, tested, tried to catch her in inconsistencies. But Sarah had lived in Mei Lin's skin so completely that she knew what Mei Lin would say before the questions were asked. Finally, Volkov leaned back and smiled. "Your people in Beijing didn't tell me you were this good, Ms. Lin. I'm impressed." Sarah had extracted the information, maintained her cover, and successfully completed the mission. When she returned to the facility that night, she found Captain Reed waiting with a rare expression of approval. "The operative you met, Volkov, he's been in the intelligence game for 20 years. He's uncovered deep cover agents from every major intelligence service. He had no idea you were military, no idea this was a test. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You've just proven you can operate in the most difficult environment imaginable, enemy territory with nothing but your wits and your cover story." But Sarah's triumph was short-lived. The next day, Lieutenant Davis rang out. The psychological pressure of Phase 2 had broken something in him, the constant lying, the inhabiting of different personas, the moral ambiguity of intelligence work. He was an exceptional operator, but he couldn't handle the mental strain of becoming someone else. 3 candidates remained. Phase 2 culminated in a final exercise that combined everything they'd learned. Each candidate was given a target, a real criminal or enemy of the state who was under surveillance. They had to infiltrate the target's organization, gather actionable intelligence, and exfiltrate without compromising their cover or breaking any laws that would create real legal consequences. Sarah's target was a human trafficking ring operating in Los Angeles. The assignment made her sick to her stomach, but she understood why it was chosen. This was as close to a real operation as training could get. These were actual criminals, and the intelligence she gathered would be turned over to law enforcement. She spent 3 weeks building her cover, becoming Jessica Morgan, a corrupt Port Authority official willing to look the other way for the right price. She made contact with the organization's recruiter, endured meetings that made her want to burn everything down, and slowly worked her way up the chain. The breaking point came when they asked her to help process a shipment, not drugs or weapons, but people. Sarah sat in a warehouse office, looking at manifests that represented human lives being bought and sold, and felt her resolve crystallize into something cold and hard. She gathered the evidence, every detail of their operation, routes, contacts, financial records, everything. Then she passed it to her handler and exfiltrated. Within 48 hours, the FBI raided the operation. 15 arrests, 23 victims freed, and a trafficking network that had operated for 5 years was destroyed. Captain Reed called her into his office afterward. "You went off script, Lieutenant. Your orders were to gather intelligence, not to bring down the entire organization." Sarah met his eyes without flinching. "Sir, with respect, I did gather intelligence. What the FBI chose to do with that intelligence was their decision." Reed's stern expression cracked into a slight smile. "That's exactly the kind of initiative we're looking for. Welcome to Phase 3, Lieutenant. You've earned it." Phase 3 was everything the instructors had promised, realistic scenarios that were indistinguishable from actual combat operations, with real consequences for failure. Sarah, Briggs, and Captain Chen were pushed to integrate all their skills, combat, intelligence, cultural expertise, and psychological resilience, into cohesive operations that would have been impossible just months ago. The first Phase 3 exercise dropped them in a simulated hostile nation, actually a section of the Nevada desert that had been transformed into a realistic Middle Eastern city, complete with role players speaking native languages and following cultural norms. Their mission: locate and extract a high-value target who was being held by a well-trained paramilitary force. Sarah found herself working alongside Briggs and Chen in a way that felt natural now, each of them playing to their strengths. Briggs handled the combat planning, Chen coordinated logistics, and Sarah managed the human intelligence, recruiting local assets, gathering information, and maintaining their cover identities. They infiltrated the city as aid workers, a cover that allowed them to move freely while gathering intelligence. Sarah used her language skills and cultural knowledge to build trust with the locals, identifying who might be sympathetic to their cause and who posed a threat. On the third day, Sarah made contact with a local woman who worked in the building where the target was held. Using everything she'd learned about reading people, about building rapport, about finding leverage without exploitation, Sarah convinced the woman to provide floor plans and guard schedules. The extraction itself was a masterpiece of coordinated action. Briggs led the assault element, Chen provided overwatch and escape route security, and Sarah used her relationship with the local woman to ensure civilians were clear of the danger zone. They extracted the target with 0 casualties and were clear of the city within 40 minutes. Master Chief Garrett watched the operation from the control room and shook his head in amazement. 3 months ago, these were individual operators with exceptional skills. Now they're a genuine special operations team. Chen's the glue holding them together. But Garrett's assessment reached the wrong ears. News of Sarah's success in Project Apex had spread through the military intelligence community, and Captain Hawthorne was paying attention. He made a call to an old friend, a rear admiral who sat on the review board that would decide whether candidates earned the Apex Trident. "I'm telling you, Jim, she's a liability," Hawthorne said. "I know the training results look good, but I've served with her. She's insubordinate, emotional, and she makes decisions based on personal feelings rather than sound tactical judgment. You put that medal on her chest, and you're telling every other operator that disobeying orders is acceptable if the results work out." The rear admiral listened, made non-committal sounds, and promised to take Hawthorne's concerns under advisement. But he also made another call, to Master Chief Garrett. "I'm getting pressure about Lieutenant Chen," the admiral said. "Captain Hawthorne is making noise about her being unsuitable for the qualification. What's your assessment?" Garrett didn't hesitate. "Sir, Lieutenant Chen is the best operator in her class. Better than Briggs, who's been a SEAL for 8 years. Better than Captain Chen, who's a decorated Marine officer. She has a natural talent for this work that I've only seen a handful of times in my career." Hawthorne's assessment is personal, not professional. "Can you prove that?" "I can show you the training records, sir." I can show you the assessments from every instructor. I can show you the results of every exercise. The data doesn't lie, Chen is exceptional. The final Phase 3 exercise was the most challenging yet. Each candidate would operate alone, without backup, in a scenario designed to test every skill they'd acquired. Sarah's mission was particularly brutal: infiltrate a terrorist cell planning an attack, identify the leadership, and prevent the attack without revealing her identity or using lethal force unless absolutely necessary. She was dropped in a simulated Middle Eastern city with a cover identity as a radicalized American convert seeking to join the cause. The role players were former intelligence operatives who knew every interrogation technique, every way to spot a fake. One mistake and Sarah would be executed, failing the exercise and likely washing out of the program. Sarah spent 2 weeks building her cover, attending prayer sessions, making connections, slowly working her way into the organization's trust. She had to be convincing enough to gain access but careful enough not to actually facilitate any real harm, even in a simulation. The terrorist cell leader was a sophisticated role player who'd actually been a real intelligence target before defecting. He studied Sarah with eyes that had seen through countless covers. "Tell me, sister," he said in Arabic, "why do you truly wish to join our cause? Speak from your heart, not from rehearsed speeches." Sarah drew on a truth she'd never spoken aloud. "Because I've spent my whole life being told I don't belong. I've fought for a country that discards people like us, that uses us and throws us away. I'm tired of being invisible, of being nothing. I want to matter." The pain in her words was real, drawn from her own experience of being stripped of rank, of being diminished and dismissed. The cell leader heard that truth and believed her. Within days, Sarah had identified the entire leadership structure, the planned attack, and the weapons cache. She passed the information to her handlers and prepared for extraction. But the final test came when the cell leader discovered a real informant within the organization, not Sarah, but another role player designed to test her reaction. "We have a traitor among us," the leader announced, pulling out a weapon and pressing it to the informant's head. "Prove your loyalty. Execute this dog." Sarah's mind raced. Killing the role player would complete her cover but violated the rules of engagement. Refusing would blow her cover and fail the mission. She had seconds to decide. She made her choice, lunged forward, and in a move that was pure instinct and training, disarmed the leader, secured him with a submission hold, and called for immediate extraction. The scenario ended in controlled chaos, but Sarah had prevented the execution, maintained enough of her cover to avoid immediate compromise, and secured the primary target. When she was debriefed, Captain Reed looked at her with something like awe. "You just rewrote the rulebook, Lieutenant. That scenario has been run 37 times. Every other candidate either refused and failed, or complied and violated ROE. You found a third option no one else saw." "There's always a third option, sir," Sarah said. "You just have to be willing to see it." 6 months after Sarah Chen had stood in front of Naval Station Norfolk and watched her rank being stripped away, she stood in a different formation. This time, the setting was a secure auditorium at the Pentagon, and the audience consisted of flag officers, special operations commanders, and a select group of observers who'd been vetted at the highest levels of clearance. 3 candidates stood at attention: Lieutenant Sarah Chen, SEAL Lieutenant Commander Kyle Briggs, and Marine Captain James Chen. They were the only survivors of Project Apex, the only 3 out of 10 who'd endured 6 months of the most demanding training ever designed. They wore dress uniforms, but their collars were bare, waiting for either vindication or final rejection. The review board consisted of 5 flag officers, including the Rear Admiral who'd received Hawthorne's warnings about Sarah. They'd spent the past week reviewing every aspect of the candidate's performance: training records, instructor assessments, psychological evaluations, and recordings of every major exercise. Admiral Patricia Henderson, a 3-star who'd broken her own barriers as one of the first female combat pilots, sat at the center of the board. She looked at each candidate in turn, her expression unreadable. "Lieutenant Commander Briggs," she began. "Your performance in Project Apex was exemplary. You demonstrated exceptional combat skills, tactical acumen, and leadership under the most extreme conditions. The board unanimously agrees that you've earned the Apex Trident. Briggs's face remained impassive, but Sarah saw the slight relaxation in his shoulders: relief, pride, vindication. Captain Chen, Admiral Henderson continued. Your organizational skills, tactical planning, and ability to coordinate complex operations were outstanding. You've proven yourself worthy of this qualification. The board unanimously agrees that you've earned the Apex Trident. Captain Chen nodded, a smile breaking through his normally stoic expression. Then Admiral Henderson's eyes settled on Sarah, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Lieutenant Chen. Your case has been complicated. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her face neutral. This was it, the moment that would define everything. We received multiple communications from Captain Richard Hawthorne expressing concerns about your suitability for this qualification, Admiral Henderson said. He characterized you as insubordinate, emotionally unstable, and prone to poor judgment. He strongly recommended that even if you completed the training, you should not receive the Apex Trident. Sarah heard murmurs from the audience. She could feel eyes on her, some sympathetic, some curious, some probably hoping to see her fail. However, Admiral Henderson continued, her voice growing stronger, we also reviewed your complete service record. We examined every decision you made during Operation Silent Thunder, the operation that resulted in your demotion. We spoke with the CIA operatives you saved, the SEAL team that provided backup, and every member of your unit. The Admiral stood, and the rest of the board stood with her. Lieutenant Chen, the decision you made in Somalia wasn't insubordination. It was exceptional tactical judgment under extreme pressure. You identified a threat that intelligence had missed, adapted your plan in real time, and saved 8 lives. That you were punished for this decision represents a profound failure of leadership, not yours, but Captain Hawthorne's. Sarah's breath caught. She hadn't expected this, hadn't dared to hope for vindication beyond simply earning the qualification. Admiral Henderson stepped down from the board table, approaching Sarah directly. Furthermore, your performance in Project Apex was not just exemplary, it was historic. You didn't just complete the training. You excelled in ways that will reshape how we approach special operations. Your instructors unanimously agree that you demonstrated skills and judgment that exceed the standards we set for this program. The Admiral reached into a case held by her aide and withdrew 3 medals. They were unlike anything Sarah had seen before, a trident similar to the SEAL insignia, but with additional elements representing different special operations disciplines, all rendered in silver and gold with a distinctive apex point at the top. Lieutenant Commander Briggs, Captain Chen, Lieutenant Chen, you have earned the right to wear the Apex Trident, a qualification held by only 3 people in the history of the United States military. You represent a new generation of special operators, capable of functioning in any environment, against any threat, with any team. Admiral Henderson pinned the medal to Briggs's chest, then to Captain Chen's chest. Then she stood before Sarah, and her formal expression softened into something almost maternal. Lieutenant Chen, there's one more thing. She nodded to her aide, who brought forward a different case. Your demotion was unjust and has been reviewed by a flag-level board. Effective immediately, you are restored to your rank of Lieutenant Commander, with back pay and a formal letter of reprimand being placed in Captain Hawthorne's record for abuse of authority. Sarah felt her knees go weak as Admiral Henderson removed the single silver bar from her collar and replaced it with the gold oak leaves she'd lost 6 months ago. Then, above those oak leaves, the Admiral pinned the Apex Trident. Furthermore, Admiral Henderson said, her voice carrying to every corner of the auditorium, given your exceptional performance, you are hereby promoted to the rank of Commander, effective immediately. The Admiral removed the oak leaves she'd just pinned and replaced them with the silver oak leaves of a full Commander, 2 ranks above where Sarah had started this journey, 1 rank above where she'd been before her demotion. The auditorium erupted in applause. Sarah stood there, overwhelmed, as Admiral Henderson stepped back and saluted her. Sarah returned the salute, muscle memory taking over while her mind struggled to process what had just happened. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Master Chief Garrett, his weathered face split by a genuine smile. You did it, Commander. You didn't just earn the medal, you changed the game entirely. There are 50 female officers who've already applied for the next Project Apex class. You know why? Sarah shook her head, still too stunned to speak. Because you proved it's possible. Because you showed them that excellence can't be denied, no matter how hard people try to suppress it. Captain Hawthorne tried to destroy you, and instead, you became something he could never touch. Lieutenant Morrison pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face, and embraced Sarah. You did it. You actually did it. Do you have any idea what this means? What you've done for all of us? Sarah finally found her voice. I didn't do it for anyone else. I did it for me. I know, Morrison said, pulling back to look at her friend. That's what makes it perfect. You didn't do it to be a symbol or to prove a point. You did it because someone told you that you couldn't, and you refused to accept that. And in the process, you opened a door that's never going to close again. As Sarah left the Pentagon that day, wearing her new rank and her hard-earned medal, she passed Captain Hawthorne in the hallway. He'd been in the audience, required to attend as her former commanding officer. His face was ashen, his eyes filled with impotent rage. Sarah stopped, came to attention, and rendered a crisp salute. Captain Hawthorne. He had no choice but to return the salute, acknowledging her superior achievement if not her superior rank. His hand trembled with suppressed fury. Permission to speak freely, sir? Sarah asked. Hawthorne's jaw clenched. Granted. You tried to break me. You tried to erase everything I'd built, to prove that I didn't belong. And you know what? You failed. Not because I'm stronger than you thought, but because you never understood what drives people like me. You thought taking away my rank would take away my worth. But my worth was never in the rank. It was in what I could do, what I could become, and what I could prove, to myself, not to you. She stepped closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. There are women coming up behind me now, Captain. Women who won't have to fight as hard as I did because I already fought that battle. And every single time you try to diminish one of them, they'll remember Commander Sarah Chen, the woman who earned a medal only SEALs get, and they'll know that your opinion doesn't matter. Sarah stepped back, saluted once more, and walked away. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. That chapter of her life was over. Outside, the Washington, D.C. sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah stood on the Pentagon steps, looking out at the city, and allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she'd accomplished. The apex trident on her chest caught the light, a symbol of excellence that no one could ever take away. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father, proud doesn't begin to cover it. You showed them Chen family steel. Your mother and I love you. Sarah smiled, typed a quick response, and headed toward her car. Tomorrow, she'd report to her new assignment, leading the training program for the next class of Project Apex candidates. She'd help shape the next generation of operators, ensuring they had the opportunities and support she'd had to fight for. But tonight, she was just Sarah Chen, a woman who'd been told she didn't belong, who'd been stripped of everything she'd earned, and who'd responded by becoming something extraordinary. The system had tried to break her. Instead, she'd broken the system. And that, Sarah thought as she drove away from the Pentagon, was the sweetest victory of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.